So much, Dominic, for organizing this. My name is Ravi Chaitanya. I am the co-founder and CEO of SENTIO VR. It's a meetings platform for the architecture and construction industry using virtual reality. In this, in this presentation, there are a few things that I would love to discuss in more detail. Uh, Starting with our story, who we are, how we got into this, where we are at today, um, in terms of as a startup, what we have learned about the problems we are solving, especially in the architecture and construction industry, um, how we came to know about the issues, the challenges that architects and people working in building constructions face, how VR is solving those problems. And I would love to sort of go into more real details of how things are getting done, what kind of VR experiences people are doing, how they are doing it, um, ideally show it to you in this presentation, where things have reached so far, what are the challenges around it still that have not yet been resolved, and what is the future looking like for VR in AEC. So these are the five sort of broad topics in which I would like to go into details. Um, Please feel free to write your questions whenever you find a particular topic interesting, and I'm sure Dominic will pick it up and we can have those discussed. If not, the presentation should be around 40 to 45 minutes, and then we can have detailed question and answers as well. So let's start. Let's start with us. How did we get into this fascinating world of virtual reality? Um, in 2015, I was looking at startup ideas to work on with my friend and co-founder Amit. I live in Santiago, Chile. He's living in Bangalore, India. And out of a side project, we buy an Oculus DK2 headset, and just completely blew our minds away. We really didn't feel that there was a technology similar to that. And we're talking about the DK2 with a lot of cables and installations. We managed to make it work. And we said, wow, this technology has a lot of potential. Why don't we figure out a way to build a business out of it? And that's how we started looking at ideas and pain points. I come from a background of product and business, love talking to people, understanding their problems. Amit is a computer science graduate from IIT. We both studied there together. Um, and we started this journey of talking to people, showing them what VR was capable of. Um, and we tried a bunch of ideas. We talked to retail, we talked to digital marketing, we talked um, about training with VR, and architects and the world of 3D. And one of our initial prototypes was just the idea of putting a 3D model into VR, something like this, where we took an architect's 3D model who was really interested in getting it to work, and got him to show his client how the future house would look like. So this is a simple sketch of model where the architect could put his client inside the model, give him a feeling of how it would look like eventually before finally when it is built. And that is how we realize the power of this technology for a real problem in the world of construction. The problem, in summary, is when a construction project has not yet been built, um, how do you visualize it? Typically, when a construction project is in the design stage, architects start with an idea, get the owner's understanding, try to bring out that idea in a visual format through floor plans, through 3D models, through images. So if you go to buy a house which has not yet been built, you largely see images, PDFs, brochures, but they're not enough for people to really understand how it feels like. And that is a big problem, because owners tend to realize these issues when the construction begins. It's already too late, and it's very expensive to make changes there. Or buyers of homes, they realize that this is not what they had originally signed up for. And therefore, this problem of architects having an imagination which allows them to visualize 3D models, but people who are not trained to read floor plans not being able to see the same thing, is a problem that we saw over and over again. So we saw architects coming and telling us, I can read the floor plan, but my client doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about. And it's a big problem when the project goes into the construction phase. So our background of having done a prototype with a few architects, understood 3D, got into a VR prototype, helped us convert this potential problem into a solution that could be applied at scale. And that is how SentioVR.com was born. In 2017, we launched our platform in a B2B SaaS model where we allowed people to come to our website, create a 14-day free trial, and a very simple way to upload their 3D content to our platform, a very simple way to get them to show it to clients on the VR, or if they do not have the headset, using links. And this is the sort of summary of our solution. We get 3D to VR in a matter of a few clicks, and that allows people to show it to stakeholders in a project. And where do we stand today? This idea today is a full-fledged platform that has more than 16,000 users in more than 100 countries. As you can see, every year there has been a gradual but substantial growth in terms of where we are at solving this problem. When we started with the days of Gear VR in 2017, then the integrations with the leading 3D modeling platforms like SketchUp and Revit, where most of the architects work, virtual tours, which are basically panoramas, images that people can upload, create, and share it with their clients, and the gradual improve with the headsets. The Go coming in 2018 was a major change in terms of mobile VR becoming cheaper and better than the Quest last year, and well, the Quest 2 this year. So just to give you guys an idea of who we are, we started with this world of VR, try to find problems. We found this really difficult problem in the world of architecture and construction, and to solve it, we built a platform that gradually at scale is today helping architects and construction companies over the world help their clients understand the projects. So I'll keep an eye on the chat button, and Dominic, just let me know as well if there are any questions. Please feel free to bring them on into this conversation as I move from one section to the other.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to just pop up, unmute yourself, and then ask. Yeah.
Fantastic. So now let's move on to the problems that we understood in AC. I just gave you a very brief insight into how we came to know about this problem, but to go into sort of more detail, typically an architecture workflow would include creating floor plans, 3D models, and if you've seen these typical real estate brochures, they include these very high photorealistic images and videos that help you understand how the project is going to look like. So that's where we started our journey. Floor plans are very hard to interpret, and photorealistic experiences are largely built from softwares that are that have quite a long journey in the world of architectural visualization, but they do not have this cloud-based or sharing features. They're largely built for people to create photorealistic images and then share it in a PDF or in a video or in an email to their clients. So the lowest hanging fruit, or the easiest problem to solve here, was to enable architects and designers to get these photorealistic experiences in an immersive fashion. What I mean by immersive fashion is, how could you share it with your clients so that they could move around the space? They could look around in 360, look at the whole scene, then move to another scene, and not just have a look at one part of the space, which is very difficult for the mind to understand how the entire space would look like. So the problem number one that we solved was enabling these softwares like V-Ray and Lumion that a lot of these designers used, enabling those images, those formats to be valid formats for architects to create immersive experiences and share it with clients. So what you're seeing here is a 360 experience that is largely exported from typical workflow softwares of the architecture and design industry. Then they can upload it to the platform of like Sentio. You can add hotspots, floor plans, all the typical experiences that an owner or a stakeholder in the project would like to have, but you can do it by sharing a link. Anybody can see it on a PC, on a mobile, and that is step one of immersion. So immersion is not always about getting people to wear a VR headset. They can do it on the PC and mobile, and that is how we saw a huge amount of traction in the early days coming to our platform, because the key here was um, there is a certain workflow that the industry uses. Can we get that workflow integrated into the VR workflow? And if you remember, the early days of VR was a lot about the Google Cardboard, and it still is. There are a lot of small and medium businesses or freelancers whose first experience continues to be the Google Cardboard. So what we did in the early days was make it very, very easy for people working on design software like Lumion or V-Ray to upload that content, get it into an immersive 360 virtual tour, share it with their clients, and have the enter VR button that would allow them to do it over a cardboard or these sort of economic headsets that a lot of people wanted to try before they actually bought a VR headset. Um, in our experience, this was the entry point of a lot of people into VR in the architecture and construction industry. This is a photorealistic experience, so you see how the images are really final in terms of their look and feel, materials, textures, and lighting. So number one problem was, rather than looking at a floor plan, can I see at an immersive experience? And that is how we solved it. From there, we moved on to the same problem, but just changing the level of immersion here. What I mean by that is, it is, while it is okay to look at a 360 space on a flat screen, and it does give you a better understanding of the space, it's a whole different experience if you look at it in 360. So a lot of the architecture and design firms started exploring this path, where they said, okay, now that I've got my content in 360, how do I get my client to actually feel present inside that space? So that when he puts the headset on, he can understand how high the ceilings are, how wide this room is, and it's a whole different understanding of the space. So here I'm going to show you a recording of how this is obviously me putting the same experience, but looking at it on a VR headset. So as you can see, you can feel how tall this building is. You can have an understanding of how it would actually feel being in front of this building. And then you can explore the other areas of the same project. For example, here I'm inside the living, and I have a really good feeling of how this living would feel like whenever it is built. This is a 3D model, but I'm right inside it. And I can give the feedback to my architect or designer what I feel about this. And we've seen a lot of our customers coming back and telling us, just by getting their clients into VR before anything was built, the clients would come up with ideas that would have probably come up when the construction begins. And therefore, it saves a huge amount of time and money by just adding a couple of steps to the presentation workflow, adding VR to the workflow, and making sure that clients have the same understanding as you have of the problem. So the way this workflow works is, and I'm going to just have a few things open here so that the audience can understand better. The way this workflow works is simply adding these 360 panoramas, dragging and dropping them here and creating the whole experience from the platform. And the 360 panoramas themselves can be created from a whole range of um, softwares that the industry already uses, like Lumion, V-Ray, 3ds Max, Corona, um, so that there is no need to create a whole new workflow here, which is where a lot of the problems with adoption of technologies lie. People are trying to add a new technology but not change the whole workflow. So this is the initial sort of experience that we had with the world of architecture and design, where largely the need was, um, how do I get my client to have a real experience, a photorealistic experience from the existing software that we use, um, so that they can have the same understanding as we do. Now, while these two problems were, our initial entry into the world of architecture, we realized that that was not the only important problem in the industry that VR could solve. On the contrary, a lot of these images are built after a lot of time is spent in creating 3D models, very detailed models in softwares like SketchUp or Revit, where a lot of work, person hours goes into creating a detailed design that is not just for the client, but also for the entire project, over the life cycle of the project. And it's very crucial to make sure that this 3D model is understood and by all the stakeholders. So while this process is going on, there is a need to get people to understand um, the details around these 3D models. And again, we realized that the problems were very similar in this situation. A lot of the architecture firms or design firms that work on SketchUp or Revit models um, did not have a very simple way of getting their clients to see it or understand it. Just sharing your PC screen and moving around the SketchUp or a 3D model on a flat screen is not enough for a lot of people to really get an understanding of it and give you real feedback as to what they would change around it. And we figured out that this was an important problem to solve in addition to the problem of photorealistic images. And the way uh, we went around solving the problem is by making, again, a very direct integration into the workflow of these firms. What do I mean by that is, for example, for the SketchUp users, there is a whole list of extensions that the architecture firms can download. That these are sort of additions to what SketchUp offers. So we created a plugin that would sit on top of their SketchUp interface. Think of it like extensions on the Google Chrome browser, which sort of extends the functionality of the browser. So what that would do is, here's this interface of SketchUp where most of the 3D models are done. What it enabled users to do is log in with their same account, upload the models to the cloud, and behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done to export these models, the geometry, the materials, the textures around it, and convert them into a VR experience. Um, the challenges around this requirement is models could be huge. Materials and textures could be very difficult to capture, could be in a lot of different formats. And then VR headsets have evolved, and therefore with each evolution, one can see that you can do more with the 3D models, but there are limitations that you hit because of the rendering capacities of the VR headsets. So this has been one of the most interesting problems to work on in the architecture and construction industry, how to get these really detailed 3D models that people are working on and constantly updating, which is another interesting problem that can be. So if you download the model to your desktop and you upload it, that's a workflow that is very tedious for a lot of people. So The way we went around solving it is by making it really simple for people to work on their models, have a plugin that sits on top of that interface, and upload the models every time they make a change to the cloud, and then go into a VR headset, put on a 6-digit code, and get into a walkthrough right away. To give you an idea of how long this can take, it could take less than 10 minutes for me to upload a model to the cloud, get into a VR meeting. And that is where the key lies. A lot of people were frustrated in the early days of VR that this process would take a long time. Not just a long time, the quality of the experience is something that people are really worried about. Am I going to see my whole geometry? Is it going to be missing some materials and textures? Um, So I'm going to just quickly run through how the experience feels like on these important platforms, just for you to have a hang of how the visual interface works on Revit and SketchUp. As you can see, the idea is very straightforward. There is a 3D modeling software which has a lot of which has an option to add extensions. That is where one of the extensions like SENTIO sits on, and you select the views and you select them, enter into your login account, upload the model. It takes a few minutes to get the model to optimize and upload, and you get a 6-digit code, which when you then go to your VR headset and um, walk through your model. So I'm going to go back to my presentation and connect to the problem again. So the problem is I have a model that I have designed, um, and now I need to get stakeholders, not just clients, to review it so that we can take better decisions around the design of it. And as you can see, the alternatives of doing it are very traditional. People would either take their PCs uh, and just open the PC and try to move around a model. Sometimes that is very hard because these PCs are extremely um, heavy, and they're not suitable for taking to meetings in different client offices. Or they would invite clients and try to get them to see it in a very big meeting with everybody around. And it's the problem that has not really been solved very well. And VR just became a huge opportunity. So this video here is going to show you how this feels like inside VR. And then I'm going to actually put on a headset and show it to you in real time how it would work or look like in the Oculus Quest 2. So let me put here in. So as you can see here, this is not a photorealistic experience. This is a simple raw 3D model. It has basic geometry, basic materials, textures, and lighting. But it is really useful in the early stage of the design so that people can get a hang of what is going to be built. So here I'm actually moving in the 3D space. What I'm doing is I'm going to pretty much any point in the model that I want to go. I do not have a limitation of moving from one view to the other. So you can look at the space from uh, any angle so that you can understand exactly how it would feel like. Um, the way of moving inside the model is, it's fascinating how that like different people find it easy and hard with different ways. What I'm doing right now is teleporting. So I'm just pushing a laser, finding where the ground is, and then moving to that point. I could also select pre-selected views and move into the different parts of the model from that view. But as you can see, what happened here is I just moved to a place where I didn't plan. So I then put the views again, I got back again, and these are the challenges people face. Moving inside VR is not very intuitive, especially with the controllers that VR headsets have. They're almost game-like controllers, and for a lot of clients and a lot of people who are not so tech savvy, they find that hard. So again, that is a huge challenge that people working in this industry have had to solve. How do I make it really intuitive so that this amazing potential of getting into my 3D model, um, getting my client to move around it as if it already exists, gets fulfilled? So now I'm going to show you actually one of the models um, that that I just actually saw that we're seeing here. I'm going to probably move around to one of our models and show you how the experience feels like. In fact, it's a very good opportunity to show you something that Oculus launched a couple of days ago, which is the ability to cast what I'm seeing on an Oculus headset onto a browser. So this is something that a lot of people, just imagine client presentations. You have one headset, 7 or 8 people, and then you can probably give it to one person, but everybody else has to see what is happening inside VR. And so I'm going to just take a small risk here in trying to get this to work in a live meeting. If we don't get it, I can still move on with the presentation. But this is something that I think is going to help a lot for people who are not so familiar probably with the interface of Oculus yet. So the way this would work is there's a casting option that has always been there, but it didn't allow casting previously onto a browser link. But now you can see that if it loads correctly, you're seeing my headset view right now. So I'm casting my view, and I'm going to go to our Sentio app. For people who are not familiar, the Quest Store has a limited set of apps, and there are a lot of apps that you can install with the side Quest. That is how our customers get our application on the Quest platform. And as I was mentioning before, you can have these 6-digit codes, which are unique for each customer or each user, to get into your account and then show it to your clients. So just to give you an insight of how easy it has become to get your model into VR. On one side, you get in onto the cloud using a plugin, and on the other side, you get into a VR meeting, and now you can cast it to a screen so that everybody has a very collaborative meeting. So here's a bunch of models that I have in my account. I'm going to just quickly open any one of them. Probably the one that I just shared in the demo, and see how it looks, how it actually feels like for an architect to be doing this in a real-time meeting. So there we go. This is a house, let's say, that we've been working on, and the multiple stakeholders who need to understand how the design looks like. Once I upload it to any 3D to VR platform like Sentio, I can put my customer into the model. Like once they put on the headset, they have a real feeling of how this feels. You can understand the height of this. You can get a feeling of how big it is, the space, and you can then navigate around it. And as I was mentioning, this is one of the biggest challenges in terms of navigating, because I'm doing it using 2 controllers, and they have in total 8 buttons between them. So for people who are not familiar with this is what happens a lot in architecture and design use cases, is they do not really know how to move around. That takes some education, some learning, and that's where a challenge lies for a lot of VR platforms like us to make it really intuitive. So here I am on the terrace, and as you can see, I'm doing the same thing that I showed you in the video before. So I can move around, I can answer my clients' queries, other people can collaborate here with this meeting, and therefore we can take better design decisions, because we don't just have to look at a 2D representation of this space, but this is actually as good as it is built. As long as the model is complete and the design is done, everybody can take a more informed decision. Fantastic. So we got the Oculus casting to work here, which is something that I've been trying over the last few days. It's a really interesting innovation in how people can share the experiences with others. So we talked about this problem of getting my design as an architect or as a construction company in front of others. Something interesting has been happening as an evolution of this problem recently. People are realizing the power of immersive meetings and how it helps them to take decisions. And the other interesting change is people are realizing that uh, it's not always easy to meet in person and do the same workflow as before, especially because of the pandemic. There is a need to have virtual meetings, but the question is, can the virtual meetings be immersive? Can I put on a headset in my uh, in my space, and can my team member put on a headset in some other place, in some other office, and my client who's in another country, can they put on a headset, and can all of us come together into a immersive virtual meeting? And this is something that, we've seen a lot of this in VR promotions and marketing campaigns. And as you can see here on this in this image, uh, there are like 5 people here, all represented via avatars, their names, and they are together reviewing the model, what we were seeing earlier as a single person casting it onto the screen. Now, the potential benefits of this is huge. It's almost like a Zoom, but in VR, where you can talk to people and you can actually navigate the space, and take those decisions without even having to look at a flat screen. And this is something that we are seeing happening more and more. Uh, Is this what every architecture and construction company is doing? No, this is a use case that requires certain familiarity and commitment to the immersive technology space. For example, imagine the number of headsets the companies need to have to get everybody to be in an immersive meeting. How many companies have made those commitments? uh, I could I can think of a very small percentage doing that, but it is something that has started to happen. The other challenge is, again, largely we have seen that VR was being used by probably 1 or 2 champions inside a company and then bringing it on to the others in a meeting. So this is a different use case where everybody has a VR headset of their own. So the the new sort of immersive experience can be taken to another level for the architecture and construction industry. The technology already exists, where people can go in and review a model together and take design decisions. However, the challenges in this use case are largely of adoption, which is something that we're seeing becoming less and less of a challenge of late. I'm going to talk about it a little further down the line about these problems. So quickly summarizing, the second part of my presentation, what are the problems in architecture and engineering and construction? Um, can people go beyond floor plans? They already did images, videos, but can they become more immersive? Through 360 tours, we saw people doing it. Sharing links of virtual tours has become the norm in the pandemic, to share a virtual tour of a project rather than just images. Then the next step was, can I get these virtual tours from the web browser to the VR headset? And the Oculus Go, the mobile VR headsets became a huge enabler in this use case, where a lot of architecture design firms were able to like get mobile VR headsets, panoramas, share it with their clients in meetings or in sales and marketing use cases, and get people to understand the space, feel present, and take decisions. That became pretty common. And then a lot of questions came around. Okay, it's not just a finished final design, but I'm building a design with other designers, with architects, with owners. Can I get that 3D model with so much information, geometry, materials, textures? Sometimes these are files that have like 2 or 3 giga of information. Can I get them into VR so that we can take better design decisions? um, and include all the stakeholders as early as possible. And that is where we saw the rise of this, plugins sitting on top of modeling softwares, uploading the models to the cloud, then getting into a VR headset, taking into a meeting, showing it to clients. We ran into problems like, I can see, but then how do others see? And now we are seeing these innovations like casting from Oculus, which I just showed. Um, that is solving a lot of these problems. And then, the ultimate experience that I would say is people coming together in a VR meeting, everybody having their own headset wherever they are, getting into a 3D model, talking about it, taking design decisions. And this is something that has started to happen with the adoption and with the technology becoming more and more accepted. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat section. I'm going to see if there are any questions right now before I move on to the next. Perfect. So
yeah,
there we go.
Damon has a question. Yeah, Damon, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure, Damon.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious as to how you see yourself different from Iris VR, Insight VR, and some of those type of companies, and what would be your competitive advantage?
Right. So you're right, Damon. So this is a use case which Iris, Insight, the Wild. There are a few other companies that are in this use case. I think there are two very clear differences from the way we see it. One is the overall user experience. When I say user experience, you break down what needs to be done to get a model into VR, and the focus on plugins, the focus on standalone VR, just the number of steps needed for architects to get this going. I think if you break it down, you'll see that Sentio has a lot of focus on SMBs, which is a lot of user experience, very few steps. Um, just to give you an idea, it would take probably 8 to 10 minutes between the sign up process and getting into VR on Sentio. I'm pretty sure that is not the case on enterprise VR focused other platforms that you mentioned. That is one difference. And the other difference I would say is we are aware that VR is a huge enabler in understanding spaces, but it has to work in combination with the other platforms that our users use. For example, the PC, the mobile. So being able to share links, even though they are from panoramas, or we're planning to get 3D models onto the web as well. I think that those are two fundamental ways of solving the problem that we see different from others in this space. Getting VR to work in conjunction with, together with other platforms like the PC, the web, mobile, and just the focus on user experience, keeping it very, very simple for the end user to get the job done rather than a complicated list of steps. It might work in the enterprise space where sort of you handhold customers, but it's very difficult to make it work in an SMB space where people want like quick results. Does that answer your question, David?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to move to, actually that was precisely what I was going to talk about in the next section. What are the challenges in getting this problem solved? And that is where a lot of these answers lie. So what we have realized here is people talk a lot about the benefits of VR, and the marketing campaigns show VR being used absolutely seamlessly. Nobody having absolutely any issues. Everything works perfect in those videos. You can see these multi-user VR meetings going on absolutely without any issues. And the reality is pretty far from it. If you talk to people using VR, if you talk to architecture, construction, or even business owners who have invested in this technology, you learn that there's a lot of difficulties in getting it to work. So imagine a high stake construction meeting or a real estate meeting where there are people with very little time, and you're trying to get one or two people to see the VR experience while you're trying to get the whole meeting other agendas done. So I've had conversations with architects saying, some people don't want to put on the headset. They don't want to, they don't feel comfortable. Or people might put on the headset, but they might press any kind of buttons on the controller and just go to some other application. Or it's very hard for them to follow the walkthrough that the architect has set up. So I'm not even talking about the earlier challenges of VR, which largely don't exist today because of the mobile or wireless VR adoption. But early days PC-based Oculus, those setups, those installations, this was a really difficult. There were a lot of challenges in getting them to use in the first place. So that's why the focus on user experience, making the technology work in the background and not being the focus of the whole scenario of the whole use case, is an extremely difficult challenge. And so just talking about multi-user VR meetings, imagine a Zoom meeting where everybody was sharing their screen. And that's something that happens in a VR meeting. People might go to all different parts of the model, and then you have to bring them together. So every platform is trying to solve this problem of user experience in their own way. But we at Sentio realize that this is probably the heart of the whole use case. How do you make it extremely simple, for a person who has a model or a 3D design that needs to be shared with multiple stakeholders, and break it down into a lot of steps. Having plugins that sit on top of these softwares is one way of doing it, so that they don't have to download and upload it. Not having to clean up the models is another important part of it. People don't like to spend time in cleaning up models for VR. They would like the model to load as it is, but that is something that a lot of platforms today are not in a position to offer. Even Sentio has its own limitations in being able to load really big models. So that is, all of those factors come into the user experience, though I have to mention that with each new headset, these problems are becoming less and less difficult. So the Oculus Quest was an absolute game changer in driving the whole industry towards wireless standalone headsets. And from there, we're only seeing things getting better. Which brings me to the second challenge. We talk to people, why aren't you using VR? You give them demos and they understand the value proposition, but then you start breaking it down into the adoption, like how many headsets do I need? They try, a lot of people that I'm talking to, like they have probably 1 or 2 headsets, but then if you want to take it to like 10 headsets, that's a significant investment for small and medium businesses. Even for enterprises, those kind of investments they take certain amount of time. So headset adoption is another challenge that people working in this industry are facing. Now, it's all relative. I'm looking at the numbers at 2018 when we had this Samsung Gear and Oculus Go, and then 2019 with the Quest coming in 2020, and we're talking about absolutely different numbers here. Just to give you guys an idea, probably less than 5% of our users would have a headset, or even less than 3% of our users would have a headset when we started out. Those numbers have completely changed. So headset adoption, drop in prices, $299. The Oculus Quest 2 is a game changer in that sense, but there are no sort of, there's no one moment that seems like it's going to change everything. It looks like a gradual adoption. As more and more people see the value and the costs go down, you're going to see that show up in the adoption. And then the third thing is seeing is believing. People need to have these experiences, and that is a huge challenge. Like, I was just able to show you what I see inside VR, but that is something that became possible. It's not been easy for software, even for Oculus, to get an easy way to share what you're seeing to others. So casting in that sense is difficult in getting people to share that experience, especially if they don't have a VR headset. How do they get the first experience is a critical part of this piece. And you'll find a lot of people having tried VR in the early days, for example, remembering those experiences and having a bias about like this technology has these limitations. But you show them the new sort of VR with the changes that have happened, the Oculus Quest coming in, and that's a completely different experience. But then they have to see it to believe it. So in my understanding, ease of use, this has largely been built by technologists, but getting people who are actually going to use it, their inputs into it, making it absolutely simple for them to get the job done, not focus on the headset itself, but actually on the job to be done. Prices going down, adoption going up, and then others trying it and seeing the value and not just sticking with the initial experiences. Those are things that this industry will require, and it's already happening for these challenges to go away one by one. So that brings me to the last part of my presentation, which is how does this look like? Like, where are things going for VR in AEC? I think in the early days, there were questions about what is the value of it. The cost benefit analysis didn't look really promising to all the important players in this industry. And that's understandable because for every new technology, there's an adoption curve. And we were seeing early adopters really trying to get this to work, but a lot of people not happy with where things were. I think we have gone past that period now with VR. I think we are talking about, we are, in our platform, we see the traction coming in from not just the places where the headsets are available, but pretty much every region in the world. So, whether it is India, whether it is Australia, New Zealand, whether it is Europe, of course, the US and Canada, all Latin American countries like Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil. I myself am based out of Chile, and I can see a lot of VR being used in the construction industry in Chile. So the phase of whether this is technology that can add that will play a significant role in this industry, I think we have gone past that stage. Just looking at the amount of traction and people putting their money into the technology as customers, I think that part looks like pretty much covered. The questions that are there is, how is it going to be used? How fast? How many people are going to be doing it? This year, the next year. How does the picture look like in 2025? And to be honest, I think very few people know the answer. The answer, I guess, the trends that are largely pretty clear is the future is immersive. There is no question that understanding 3D spaces in VR has very few alternatives that can provide that kind of an impact and value. So immersion is definitely part of the future. The future is wireless as well. I think in the beginning there was quite a lot of debate about different platforms looking at investing into different kinds of headsets. For example, a lot of the platforms that we mentioned earlier, investing in the Oculus Rift ecosystem because they were the ones that could power these heavy 3D models. I think it has become largely clear that the future is wireless, with the Oculus Quest becoming the headset everybody's trying to make the experience work on. And the third aspect of it is it's not just about one or two people at companies having the headset and having the experience and showing it to others. This is about collaboration. I think the collaboration is probably the buzzword anyways in the construction industry, where there are so many stakeholders who have to come together and take decisions. So anybody working in this space has to think about how the hardware and the software can be used so that multiple people, whether they are in person in a meeting together, whether they are distributed over different places, how can they use this technology and take the decisions that they have to using the immersion capabilities that it offers. So in summary, the future of VR in AEC, in my opinion, is absolutely bright, where there's a lot of people from the industry who have changed their opinion, who have committed to this technology, and continues to happen at a faster scale than before for reasons that I talked about earlier. How fast, how many people, just to give you an idea of scale, probably 18 million professionals work in the AEC industry. We're certainly not seeing even 1 million of them trying VR right now. So we're very early stages in terms of adoption, but that is something that is going to change as the software and hardware keeps improving. So with that, I see that this presentation is already around 45 minutes, which is more or less what I had planned for. This is the content that I would have, I wanted to share with all of you our experience. This is the time I would love to open up the conversation. I want to see what the conversations in the chats that have been given, and discuss with all the people present here, whatever questions they have, open up this conversation. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, any questions related to you want to ask Ravi? Feel free to ask. Yeah, Ravi, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Yeah, right now we use like Oculus 2, and I remember few weeks ago when I use it, I think Facebook is trying to use hand gestures to replace the controller. So what will you do differently as for your UX UI to make, because I know like for the, the traditional controller, you pretty much shoot a ray and point it
Right.
like different buttons, and the button look like pretty much similar to the traditional UX UI, but it's just vertical and a little far away and bigger. So what will you kind of adjust your UX user experience according to the different technology? Yeah.
Right. So Dominic, that's a really interesting question. So the controllers, one of our philosophies has been, to sort of learn from the customers themselves, because, we drive a lot of our decisions based on what's actually happening. And while this hand tracking is been experimental now, it's part of the overall experience. It's still something that has not sort of caught up with our user base. So, because moving around a 3D model requires a lot of gestures, a lot of pointing, a lot of teleporting, I think there's still a lot of reliance on the controllers. What we plan to do is to find out the early enthusiasts in the user base that we have, who are, figuring out this challenge of experience inside the model, and work with them in order to get the experience right. It is something that we did on the controller side as well. So, just to give you an idea, we had a lot of feedback coming in from our users and customers saying, the controllers need to have, these are the functionalities we would like to have. We would like to be able to rotate the model. We would like to be able to teleport in a more intuitive fashion. Is something that we just changed in the platform recently. So it's always iterative. I think the design experience here is, what I can tell you is that the key here is to not build things based on how you would do or others are doing. It's just to include the people, the users, all the time into the decision making around it. And at this point, I don't see that being sort of the primary concern, because people are largely trying to figure out the controller and get the experience going. But it's something that we're going to take up, as we get more people talking about it and asking for it and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And then I think Damon has other questions. Damon, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Thanks. So great presentation. Thanks for sharing. So I had a question. You're pulling in this data from Revit, and maybe I missed it in what you showed. Are you able to also access the metadata of the objects within the scene, or are you just doing the visualization component?
Right. So so to answer that question, in this stage of our product, we have consciously tried to get the visualization absolutely accurate. What I mean by that is, geometry, materials, textures, get that spot on. And our focus has been on visualization, largely because our use case has been about client presentations. We are very aware that, as we go deeper into this use case, the metadata becomes a really important part of the overall needs of the industry. So about having that, not just the geometry information, but also the other information associated with it. And we have plans to get it out into our platform, so that it's something that we have planned for our future versions. But we definitely think that is something that we want to take up once, the visualization aspect of it, which is why largely most people have signed up for our platform, is absolutely spot on.
So as a follow-up to that, you would say then a bulk of your users are using your stuff for visualization, not necessarily accessing the metadata for construction solutions, RFPs, RFIs, that kind of thing?
Yes, you're right, Damon. So what is happening a lot is, I think clearly here, the primary pain point has been for people to get their customers and clients into the experience. I think that has been largely the driver behind people trying VR. As then how they do it, and become more familiar with it, we are aware that people are also trying to get this for decision making, and therefore they need access to the information that is in the original file, in the Revit file, for example. And it's something that we have put it as an important part of our 2021 roadmap. But I would largely agree with what you summarized, that people in the architecture and design space especially are trying to get their clients into VR, and just to get that experience right, I think it would be, it's a pretty challenging task. It's a high value task, and then follow it up with other sort of adjacent use cases like the one you just mentioned of getting the information and decision making around it.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
in the chat, Dominic, I can see a couple of points from Damon. Perfect. Okay. So yes, Damon, I'm aware. You mentioned about like the file sizes of the large file sizes. You're right. There has been a pretty solid advancement in this space, I think, from a couple of platforms, especially. I think what we'll have to be, I think what a couple of things here is that are very important is, when I talk about user experience, it's not just about like the file size and cleaning the file size. I think the key here lies in breaking down the steps beyond the marketing videos of what actually needs to be done to get a model into VR, and then how does that experience work out in front of clients. And I think not just Sentio, I think pretty much all platforms have a lot of work to do in that space.
Yeah. So what file size can we upload to SENTIO VR?
It's a question we get really often, Dominic. So the answer is there is no one number that one would provide. The reason is that typically it doesn't depend on the exact file size. It depends on a lot of factors that the file has. Like, so the amount of geometry it has, the number of materials, texture, images that it has, and therefore we see some sort of ballpark numbers in terms of millions of polygons. There, we see that the export process might face some challenges or the limitations of the headset, but I wouldn't put a number to it and say this is the file size on which things fail. I think it's more about the combination of the number of polygons, the materials and texture images that the files have, which make the process work or not work.
Yeah, the reason why I'm caring about this types of question is because before I did some Spark AR and Lens Studio, which is more like a AR for social media. So as far as I know, that I don't know whether the number is changed or not, but Ethwall, their upload size is 100 MB, which, because I'm not specialized in 3D, so, and then
Right.
I know that they have a limitation of some certain numbers of polygons, so I have to reduce it. And some of my friends, they are the expert of 3D, so they can make sure they can create a really amazing environment with like the lowest file size. So those people or those artists or experts can create amazing art, while like amateur, like me, like 3D amateurs, I probably need to change the platform or do something else about the setting, because I know like 3D means a lot for VR or AR experience. And then as for Spark AR, which is you upload to Spark AR Studio, and then you can export to Instagram and Facebook AR. And those, I think they have less restriction for the 3D file size. So that's why I keep working on that, just because I couldn't make like such as, I think it's 4 MB or 6 MB just for Lens Studio. So it means that if you want to create an amazing scene in Snapchat, you probably need to be super specialized in texturing and or modeling to reduce the size of the file. So that's why I think if the file size can be bigger, and then the latency or something can kind of like, like less restriction, maybe more amateur people like me in 3D can kind of upload more stuff there without like trying to Google it, how to reduce the texture size. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this has been, just to give you some numbers, typically, when we see the models being uploaded on our platform, we've had more than 30,000 walkthroughs now, so uploaded, so we have some data around it. And it could range from something around a simple 50 MB file or 100 MB file to up to 1.5 GB or 2 GB. So that some Revit files are that huge, or even more than that. So what that means is there's a certain number of polygon count that's getting uploaded. We have been able to get up to millions of polygons. I would say up to 4 or 5 millions of polygons work on SENTIO. So that would probably translate into a file size of 1 GB probably going through. There have been cases where it's very hard to give exactly what would and wouldn't, but that just gives you sort of a ballpark as to where you could export a model with 14 or 15 million polygons and still get it through on our platform and into the VR headset. Obviously, these kind of there's a lot of technical details involved here in terms of what else is there in the file size apart from the polygons, but that gives you an idea that we're not talking about 100 MB or 150 MB or just few 100,000 polygons. I think you're talking about millions of polygons going through and being able to render on the Oculus Quest platform. That is something that is happening. I think every platform is working on this problem. This is probably one of the biggest engineering challenges right now, which some might have made more progress compared to the others, but I think everybody is more or less at a point where millions of polygons are getting rendered on the VR headset.
Yeah, and then, yeah, I think Damon has a question, like what are the recommended file size polygon count for your platform?
Yes, Damon. So as I said, I think right now it would be safe to say anything beyond 20 million polygons is a really difficult one to upload and get it right. But below that, I've seen success cases depending on other types of images and material files into that polygon into that file. But in my opinion, 10 to 15 million polygons is probably the high end. Just to give you an idea, less than 10% of the models that are uploaded actually have problems of polygon count today. So I think, in terms of ballpark numbers, more than 90%, which are typically in the range of either 500,000 polygons to probably a few million polygons is what we typically get from architecture and construction firms uploading. And that's something that we're largely able to work on. But it's something that we want to also keep improving and keep raising that bar. Just a good point here would be the Quest 2 enables you to actually raise that bar is something that we're working on right now. So you'll see us sharing more and more good news about what can be done in terms of the file size. It's becoming less and less of a limitation as the hardware has improved.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so any other questions related to, do you support IFC?
Not yet, Damon. So to be, our focus here has been largely on getting the SketchUp and Revit workflow work. We've got a lot of traction there. We see a lot of challenges there, and we're trying to get that right and then move on to the other file formats.
Yeah, yeah, and then, yeah, as far as I know that Spark AR, they kind of have a library, collaborate with Sketchfab. So yeah, so for example, like a lot of artists, they find out that it's so easy to create AR experience because they can just open it and click the AR, like a lot of assets, because not many people are specializing in 3D right now. So for me, like my background is graphic design, UX, UI, more flat 2D. So that's why I usually click the asset and kind of put in and start composing. So I'm wondering, do you have any, like, for example, like partner with some assets, companies, so people can just drag and drop?
So I think again, if you look at the SketchUp and Revit integrations, those are direct integrations. Those what we call like partnerships in a way, because it sits on top of the Autodesk and SketchUp store. So if you Google like virtual reality in those stores, you'll not see a lot of platforms. There are probably 2 or 3 there that are trying to solve this problem directly through those platforms. When it comes to materials and asset libraries, I think we're not trying to solve that problem, Dominic. What we're trying to solve, we're not trying to solve the content. How do I get more content? And I think there are a lot of people already on that problem. The problem that we're trying to solve is, if we have that content, how easy is it for you to get that across to multiple stakeholders, share it, not just in VR, beyond VR, multiple changes you might make. How do you get that across in-person meetings, in immersive meetings? And I think that there are really unsolved challenges around that use case, which is where we would like to sort of play a very important role.
I see. Yeah, and then Damon, do you want to unmute yourself and ask another questions you have on chat?
Yeah, sure. Sorry to be asking so many questions, but this is
absolutely. Go ahead, Damon. I'm really
looking
forward to it. No worries.
So, so I'm curious as to if you currently support any scan data, right? So, are you able to take things in from like Faro, Leica, that kind of thing, right? So, any reality capture data, and then kind of as a part 2 of that, are you also including any geospatial 3D data from Esri Tools, ArcGIS, that kind of thing?
Right. So as I said, Damon, we've experimented with point cloud data a bit. We haven't got into that use case too much, because what we're trying to do, Damon, here is get the 3D modeling pipeline really solid with the existing integrations we have, and then sort of plug in this additional data formats. You mentioned about IFC, you mentioned about the geospatial data. Those are plans that we have, going forward, but I would, pretty much, I'm pretty sure right now, this is not what we are focusing on, but something you'll see more and more coming out from us going forward. Interestingly about, what I'm seeing a lot happening on the platform, because we have the 360 tours integration, I'm seeing a lot of construction companies actually capturing 360 photos of their projects and uploading it and creating sort of these walkthroughs of so that they can track the construction progress. It's not a direct use case, but it's something that is happening a lot more recently. So we are seeing that happening, but that is obviously not point cloud or these professional capturing softwares. This is just 360 cameras trying to get the construction progress up on the platform and sharing with the stakeholders. That is something that we're seeing. But regarding these specific formats, Damon, I think these are all sort of into our product development. Yes, absolutely. So a lot of that structuring side and holo builder use case that you're seeing there is happening on our platform as well.
Yep. Any other questions? Yeah, if you have any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly to Ravi.
Hi, Ravi. It's Lucy. I have a very general question because I really don't have any background in this, and it's really informative what you just presented. And I guess all the technical terms and stuff, it's a little bit too deep for me. But I think it's really great. I definitely will look into that. So my question is that when you talk about adding this, like adapting the VR aspect into the construction industry and field, you mentioned this term. You said people sometimes would resist in cleaning the file for cleaning the 3D model file for the VR headset. So I wonder, can you give more details? Like, so from in the traditional way and moving toward right now, like the more advanced VR technology, right now, has it been adding a lot of time, adding more time for the designers to create the VR adapted 3D model? Like, has it really like quite so much time that people really resist it so much right now? Like, where are we right now? Stage.
We are in a much better place than we were a year ago, Lucy, on that. You know, a year ago, I think there were a lot of restrictions, and we really spent a lot of time actually trying to help customers or users get their models ready for VR. It's happening a lot less, but it's something that is, there's always going to be a sort of limit in terms of, you know, what you can and cannot do. And so we always find a percentage of users uploading content that is hard to support on the mobile VR or the standalone VR headsets. That percentage is going that getting lower and lower, but it's something that nobody wants to do. So I see there are two challenges here. One is just the sheer file sizes, which you know, I think is going to be less and less of a challenge as the headsets have gone better and the software is also sort of becoming more mature.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is something that I've seen a lot of architects and designers especially, you know, talk about, is getting those photorealistic experiences in VR is something that all of them really want. But the way to do it today is largely by, you know, getting them in a more images format, right? Like, so what I showed earlier, photorealistic images. So you still don't have this 3D photorealistic experience happening for a lot of sales marketing and even client presentation use cases. So I think that's a big gap that exists. So it's one is the file size, just, you know, sheer, imagine an airport getting uploaded to a VR headset, that's huge. And the other is, you know, photorealism, getting materials, textures, lighting, all that information in VR. I think those are two sort of technical challenges that people are looking for VR developers to solve. The first is largely, you know, in a position where I think it should not be a problem. Let's say 6 months from now or 12 months from now, I think we're going to talk less and less about it. The other one, I think, is going to take more time.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And also one more question. I'm just very curious about this. So do you see any someone or any platform that possibly would allow like mutual like work platform for the VR model sharing, like a collab platform?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think a lot of what just close my yeah. So yeah, I think that is something where all of us are getting towards. So, you know, it depends a lot on as I mentioned, on the availability of the headsets. So for like 10 people in a team to work together, they need to have headsets. That's a challenge right now, but we're seeing companies making that commitment, and with collaboration being pretty much a standard feature on all VR platforms. The software, I think, is much more ready. The hardware is ready. I think it's about more people buying in and trying it out and seeing the value of it. We're seeing a lot of sort of marketing and promotion around it, but in my opinion, VR is still being used by, you know, 1 or 2 people inside a company trying to promote it in-person meetings. I think that's going to change, but that's how it's being used largely today. You know, people familiar with the headsets, you know, they're taking it to meetings, showing it to others. But whether people will, you know, do these meetings from wherever they are collaboratively, absolutely, it started to happen. And with the integrations getting better with the existing workflow, which is, I guess, a really important part of this piece, it's going to be a lot more easier for people to integrate VR seamlessly into their workflow and not have this sort of separate VR meeting and then go back to work, which is what a lot of people are facing today. I think that's something that's going to happen. For example, you know, when you put on, you know, I've tried this with a few customers. They really see the possibility of getting the whole team in a VR meeting and sorting out the problems faster at work. But once they try it, once everybody has a headset, and those are the challenges we're facing, Lucy, here.
I see. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Any other questions? Feel free to ask Ravi. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. So Ravi, when you're dealing with sensitive data, right? Say I'm building a hospital, or more importantly, nuclear power plant, government facility. How do you secure the access to that information, right? What additional precautions do you take for security when storing and then giving access to view that super sensitive building information?
Right, that's a really important question. I think, Damon, I see that you've mentioned about construction industry and working in that. It's something that a lot of customers really deeply care about, right? Like when they upload models, they want to make sure that their NDAs are taken care of. And we've been aware of this from day one. So what we have done, I mean, I think on the technical side of things, the engineering team has, a set of implementations that sort of ensure that our data is secure. And I don't think like I'm the person to be talking about how exactly technically it's set up, but I think on the more sort of user front, what we have done is make sure that there are password protected meetings. That it's not easy for people to sort of just get into meetings of others. It hasn't been happening. The files have not been. We haven't had for 4 years any cases of people saying our files have been for some reason been accessible to others. So it's something that we've built in the way the use cases. We have a collaboration platform, so inviting members is something really well managed inside the platform. So you cannot so that people managing an account are very clear as to who others have access to that data, with what privileges they have. They can remove people from the accounts if that is something that they feel is compromised. So, and we at SENTIO ourselves, we do not share any kind of whether it's in our marketing or whether it's in our communications. We do not share any access, any content at all from our customers' data. So I think those are high-level precautions in terms of user-facing decisions that we take. And on the technical side, I think it's a more sort of engineering solutions that that we take in terms to make sure that data is protected. We use some standard engineering solutions around it. I don't think I'm the person to give you the exact details around it, but it's something that we're very aware of, David. It's a big issue.
Cool, thanks. And then I guess my last question for now is bi-directional, right? I noticed that a lot of folks want to be able to bring the data out of Revit or something like that. But then the idea is that we're in this design review. I'm the client, I want to make these changes. How are you pushing that data back into Revit or the model? Do you have the bi-directional, or are you just doing build it in Revit, push out, say what you want to change, and then the person has to go back in, build it, push it back out to VR and that kind of thing? What's the process and how are you handling that?
So that is something that is the goal, I would say. I mean, I think that the idea here right now, what we're doing is, got the content, you get it as it is into a meeting, and then you show it in a meeting. But then you're right, like people might have feedback and you want to change it, and then today the software, at least SENTIO, is not in right now solving that problem. But that is something that is I think going to be pretty standard in all software solving this problem going forward. I think technically those are all feasible. Solutions. What we are sort of trying to do, as I mentioned earlier, Damon, is the whole sort of job to be done. First of all, is I have a model, like get into the VR and can I show it and take those decisions, right? I think then just focusing on that and getting bits and pieces of that right is something that we are focused on first. We're pretty close to that. I think our traction and our sort of adoption talks about it, and then go into these are all concerns, feedback, issues that we have been getting from our customers. We are, with our engineering team, picking them up, putting into the software. But this particular point is something that I think is going to show up in 2021 in most softwares working on this, including ours.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, okay. So thank you, Ravi, for being today's guest. And then, I will see you all next Saturday. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dominic, for organizing this, for inviting me, and everybody who participated. Really appreciate your questions, and hopefully you've got some value out of this presentation. Have a good Saturday.
Yeah, Great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.